Ladies, let me tell you something important today. If he's not calling or texting you, it's not because he's busy. It's not because he forgot. It's not because he's not a phone person. It's because he hasn't felt the pull, the energy, the magnet that makes him need to reach out to you. But here's the truth. You have more power than you think. There's an invisible language we all speak, one that requires no words, no texts, and no calls. It's the energy we give off. And whether we realize it or not, people respond to that energy instinctively. In dating especially, your energy often speaks louder than your words ever could. You could say all the right things and still be overlooked if your energy says, I'm anxious, desperate, or uncertain. On the flip side, you could say very little and still command attention if your energy says, I'm confident, self-assured, and whole. When you truly embrace this concept, the entire dynamic of how you interact with men begins to change. Have you ever noticed how some women seem to effortlessly attract attention without even trying? It's not always about physical beauty, status, or charm. It's about the way they carry themselves. They walk into a room like they belong there, like they have nothing to prove. That kind of energy is magnetic. It tells the world, including any man watching, that she doesn't need validation. She already knows her worth. And the moment you embody that kind of energy, men can't help but notice, not just because they find it attractive, but because it creates a sense of mystery and challenge. You become someone who doesn't just take up space, you own it. When you focus too much on whether he'll call or text, you unintentionally shift your energy into a space of lack and insecurity. That waiting energy is heavy, and men feel it, even from a distance. The more anxious and available you seem, the less urgency he feels to connect with you. Why? Because it feels like you're already too accessible, too invested, too focused on him. That dynamic removes the thrill of pursuit. It removes the balance. And in that imbalance, the man no longer feels the need to take initiative because energetically, you've already taken all the space. Contrast that with a woman who is grounded in her energy. She's not waiting, she's living. Her thoughts are not consumed by one man's attention. She has things to do, people to see, goals to crush. And that energy, that self-contained, radiant, emotionally neutral stance, that's what draws people in. It creates curiosity. It silently asks, what is she up to? Why is she chasing me? What makes us? And before he even realizes it, he's texting, he's calling. Not because she demanded it, but because her energy created the desire. Energy doesn't lie. You can't fake high self-worth. It has to be cultivated from within. But once you do, it changes everything. The neediness fades, the anxiety quiets. You no longer spend hours decoding messages or wondering if you're too much or not enough. You simply exist in your truth, knowing that anyone who's meant to be in your life will respond to you. Not because you pressure them to, but because they were drawn to the woman you've become. You no longer need to chase because you become the kind of woman people chase. Understanding the power of your energy also allows you to take responsibility for your side of the interaction. It's not about blaming yourself for someone's lack of communication. It's about recognizing that when your energy is rooted in fear, insecurity, or scarcity, it alters the dynamic. When you shift into a place of grounded confidence, it not only changes how men see you, it changes how you see you. And when you elevate your own perception of yourself, the people around you will start rising to that level or falling away. Either way, your energy becomes the filter that protects your peace and attracts what truly aligns with your worth. We live in a world where communication has never been easier. With a phone in every hand and a notification always just a swipe away, Reaching out to someone takes seconds. So when a man doesn't call or text you, especially when he knows you're waiting, it's not because he lost your number, forgot, or had no time. It's because he chose not to. That may sound harsh, but it's the truth. And once you accept it, you free yourself from excuses that keep you stuck in confusion. You stop hoping for breadcrumbs and start demanding the feast you deserve. Too often we give people the benefit of the doubt long after they've shown us who they are. We convince ourselves he must be busy, overwhelmed, or just bad at texting. We rationalize his silence to protect our own feelings because admitting someone doesn't care enough to reach out hurts. But in trying to shield ourselves from that sting, we ignore the deeper truth. Effort is a reflection of priority. If you matter to someone, you'll know, not because they said it once, but because their actions and their consistency make it clear. When a man truly values you, no obstacle will prevent him from communicating. He might be tired, but he'll still check in. He might have a packed schedule, but he'll carve out time. Why? Because when someone wants to talk to you, they don't need reminders. They don't forget. They don't disappear. Silence is not a neutral act. It's a choice. And when you keep making excuses for that silence, you allow someone else to make you feel optional. That's not love. That's not connection. That's emotional starvation disguised as patience. It's also important to understand that people treat you based on what you tolerate. If you continue accepting inconsistent behavior, you teach someone that you'll stick around regardless of how they show up. If he knows he can go days or weeks without reaching out and still have full access to your attention and energy, there's no motivation for him to change. The only way someone learns to value you is when you show that you value yourself enough to walk away from less than you deserve. That's not punishment, that's self-preservation. And remember, silence speaks volumes. If he's not reaching out, he's communicating something, just not with words. He's saying, you're not my priority right now. He's saying, I'm okay with you wondering where we stand. He's saying, I know you care, but I'm not ready or willing to give you the same energy. That's hard to hear, but necessary. Because when you start listening to what silence is really saying, you start clinging to the fantasy and start facing the fact. Acknowledging that his silence is a choice isn't about blame, it's about clarity. It's about stepping into your power and recognize that you don't have to wait around for someone to realize your worth. You're not here to audition for love, to compete for someone's time, or to hope that one day they'll finally get it. If he's not calling or texting, that's the answer. And the real question is, what are you going to do with that truth? There's a deeply ingrained belief many of us have been conditioned to carry, that love must be earned through effort, that attention must be pursued, and that someone's affection is a reward we can win if only we try hard enough. This belief is not only false, it's destructive. The moment you begin chasing someone, you automatically place them on a pedestal and diminish your own value in the dynamic. You start sending a message, consciously or not, that they are the prize and you are trying to prove your worth. That mindset is exhausting, depleting, and ultimately ineffective. Chasing turns attraction into pressure. When you're constantly initiating, constantly texting first, constantly trying to keep his attention, you're not giving him the space to show genuine interest. Instead, you're creating a one-sided dynamic where you carry the emotional labor while he simply receives. But relationships, real meaningful ones, require mutual investment. If you're always reaching out while he's always pulling back, you're not in a relationship. When you're in a performance, try to convince someone that you're good enough to stay. Let's be clear, a high-value person doesn't chase. A high-value person is receptive to love, not desperate for it. When you know who you are, what you offer, and what you deserve, you understand that your time and energy are precious. You no longer feel compelled to pursue people who aren't matching your energy. In fact, you begin to feel turned off by anyone who requires convincing. Chasing becomes beneath you, not because of pride, but because of clarity. Clarity that love should be reciprocal, not one-sided. There's also a psychological truth at play here. People value what they have to invest in. When someone puts effort into building a connection, they feel more bonded to it. But when they're being chased, they don't have to do anything to keep you around. There's no challenge, no sense of earning or appreciating your presence. Instead, your availability becomes taken for granted. You stop being special, you become expected, and that's when interest fades. Because nothing about the dynamic feels compelling anymore. When you stop chasing, you shift the power dynamic in your favor. You reclaim your energy, your peace, and your self-respect. You begin to approach relationships from a place of desire, not need. And that's the most attractive energy anyone can bring into a connection. You're no longer trying to force a bond or beg for attention. You're allowing the right person to step up. And if they don't, you're secure enough to let them go without falling apart. That strength is magnetic and it commands a higher level of treatment. Most importantly, when you stop chasing others, you finally have the space to chase yourself. Your goals, your dreams, your peace, your growth. You become the center of your own universe again. And from that place of fullness, you attract people who are already aligned, already interested, already capable of giving you what you've always deserved. Because in the end, the right person won't need to be chased. They'll recognize your worth and walk toward you without hesitation. In the early stages of attraction, or even in the middle of a romantic whirlwind, it's easy to become consumed by thoughts of him. You find yourself constantly checking your phone, replaying conversations in your head, and analyzing every interaction for hidden meaning. Suddenly your day, your mood, even your sense of self-worth becomes tied to whether he texted back, whether he seemed distant, or whether he's as invested as you are. But this hyper focus on him doesn't bring clarity or connection. It only creates anxiety. Because when your emotional energy revolves around someone else, you lose touch with your own center. Focusing on him takes you out of your own life and puts you into a mental loop that leaves little room for joy or presence. Your goals take a back seat. Your self-care becomes inconsistent. Your routines revolve around what he's doing, what he's thinking, or when you might hear from him. The irony is, the more you revolve around him, the more he drifts. Because that type of unbalanced focus comes with pressure, and pressure repels. Love doesn't bloom in desperation. It blooms in freedom, individuality, and mutual appreciation. That's why pulling your attention back to yourself is not only empowering, it's essential. When you focus on yourself, you return to your power. You remember who you were before you started wondering whether you were enough. You reconnect with your passions, your friends, your laughter, your essence. You fill your schedule with things that light you up instead of things that make you wait. This shift in energy is not about pretending you don't care. It's about proving to yourself that your life is rich, beautiful, and complete, regardless of anyone else's presence. And when you live from that place of wholeness, your value becomes undeniable, not just to others, but to you. Men and people in general are drawn to those who are already fulfilled. When you're busy living, glowing, and growing, you radiate something irresistible. You're not needy, you're not chasing, and you're not shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's timeline. That energy sends a clear message. I want love, but I don't need it to feel whole. That's powerful. It makes him lean in. It makes him wonder what you're about. It makes him realize that if he wants a place in your world, he has to earn it. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're hard to forget. The truth is, the moment you stop obsessing over someone else's actions, you start taking real action in your own life. You become more intentional with your time, more aligned with your purpose, more in tune with your desires. And as you do, you naturally attract higher quality connections, not because you're doing it to get a reaction, but because you're evolving. Your standards rise. Your boundaries sharpen. You stop entertaining anything or anyone that makes you feel unsure, unseen, or unworthy. You stop trying to fit into someone else's world and start building a world so rich that only the right people can enter it. You're focusing on yourself is not selfish. It's self-honoring. It's how you reclaim your peace and rebuild your identity outside of anyone else's affection. You stop asking, why isn't he calling? And start asking, what makes me feel good today? You trade anxiety for alignment, confusion for confidence, and waiting for action. And as your life fills up with meaning, adventure, and self-respect, something amazing happens. The need for someone to validate your worth fades, and in its place, you stand tall, centered, and completely in your power. We often think that attraction is all about appearance, the right outfit, the perfect selfie, the perfectly crafted message. But true magnetism goes far deeper than the surface. It comes from energy, from confidence, from the quiet, unshakable knowing of who you are and what you bring to the table. And at the core of that powerful energy is self-respect and emotional independence. When you truly respect yourself, when your emotional world doesn't hinge on another person's validation, you stop trying to be chosen and start choosing yourself. That's when people feel drawn to you without knowing why. Self-respect is magnetic because it sets a tone. It says, I know what I deserve, and I won't settle for less. You don't have to announce it or make it loud. It's felt in your boundaries, your posture, your tone, your choices. You carry yourself with dignity, and that energy demands a high level of interaction. People are naturally more intrigued and more respectful when they sense that you won't tolerate being disrespected or devalued. It's not about being cold or distant. It's about being rooted in your truth, your worth, your standards. Emotional independence complements self-respect in a powerful way. When you're emotionally independent, you don't rely on someone else to make you feel whole, happy, or worthy. You enjoy connection, but you don't need it to feel secure. That makes your presence refreshing, even healing, because you're not draining, not clinging, not performing. You're not on edge waiting for a message or losing sleep over mixed signals. You have a life. You have inner peace, and that inner peace becomes something others crave simply by being around you. When you lack emotional independence, however, your energy starts to chase validation, often without realizing it. You start bending your boundaries, hiding your true feelings, or accepting inconsistent behavior just to keep the connection alive. But that kind of behavior only sends one message: I'm willing to shrink myself to be loved. And the moment someone senses that, they lose respect. The very thing you're doing to try to keep someone close is what makes them pull away, because true attraction can't grow in the presence of emotional desperation. It only thrives in confidence, calm, and clarity. Think about the people you've been most drawn to, not just romantically, but in life. Chances are they had a strong sense of self. They weren't easily rattled. They had their own interests, opinions, and passions. They weren't overly available or desperate for attention, but they also weren't cold. They had presence. You become someone people want to be around, not because you're trying hard to impress them, but because you're simply being who you are unapologetically and fully. When you reach that level of internal stability, the game changes. You stop asking, how do I make them like me? And start asking, does this person add value to my life? You no longer seek relationships to fill a void. You seek them to complement an already full life. And in doing so, you raise your standards effortlessly. You no longer chase, beg, or settle because you know that anyone who doesn't meet you at the level of your self-respect doesn't belong in your world. You're no longer magnetic because of how you look. You're magnetic because of who you are. There's a subtle but powerful difference between setting standards and giving ultimatums. And understanding that difference is what separates a woman who commands respect from one who feels she must force it. Standards are about you. They come from a place of self-awareness and quiet strength. They're the personal boundaries you live by, not because you're trying to control others, but because you know what you're worthy of. Ultimatums, on the other hand, are about control. They often come from frustration, fear, or a last-ditch attempt to make someone behave the way you want them to. And while standards invite respect, ultimatums usually trigger resistance. When you set a standard, you're saying, this is what I allow in my life, and anything less is not acceptable. You're not demanding that someone change. You're stating how you operate and what your values are. It's not about him, it's about you. That energy is compelling because it's rooted in dignity, not desperation. A man might not always agree with your standards, but he will respect them. And more importantly, respect you. And those who can't meet them will naturally fall away, saving you from having to chase or compromise yourself. Ultimatums, however, tend to come out when you've stayed in a situation that already violates your standards. You waited, hoped, and tolerated behavior that didn't sit right with you, and now, out of emotional exhaustion, you lay down a demand. Call me more, or I'm leaving. Change, or I'm done. Commit, or I'm walking away. While the message may be valid, the delivery often comes from a place of reactivity. And because it's framed as a threat, it puts the other person on the defensive rather than inspiring them to rise to your level. Ultimatums often backfire because they expose that you've been accepting less than what you really want. Setting standards early, however, allows people to see who you are from the start. If consistency is a standard for you, then you naturally pull back from anyone who's flaky without needing to explain or demand. If respect is your standard, you don't argue with someone who's disrespectful. You disengage. That kind of quiet conviction is powerful. You never have to say, treat me right or I'll leave. You simply live in alignment with your values, and people either rise to meet you or remove themselves. Either way, you win. Not because you got your way, but because you honored your worth. Men in particular are wired to respond to energy that challenges them to step into their best selves. But that challenge has to come from inspiration, not manipulation. When a woman sets a standard and lives by it unapologetically, she becomes someone worth earning. She's not controlling the man, she's controlling her access. She's not saying change for me. She's saying this is who I am and this is what I accept. That kind of integrity is rare. And because it's rare, it's deeply attractive. It inspires growth, commitment, and initiative from the right man. Not out of pressure, but out of desire. The standards are not about being rigid or inflexible. They're about being clear. And clarity is kindness. When you know what you expect and communicate that with grace and certainty, you make it easier for the right people to show up and easier for the wrong ones to walk away. You're not leaving room for confusion, guessing games, or passive-aggressive tactics. You're owning your space and allowing others to choose whether they can align with it. And in doing so, you create relationships that are rooted in mutual respect, not emotional tug of war. Because in the end, the most empowered connections happen when you no longer beg to be chosen. You simply choose yourself and let your standards do the rest. It's time to remember who you are. You are the prize. Not because someone said so, not because of what you look like, not because of how someone else treats you, but because of the value you hold within. The moment you truly believe that, everything changes. The way you walk into a room changes. The way you respond to silence changes. The way you carry yourself through uncertainty, through attraction, through disappointment, all of it shifts. Because when you know you're the prize, you stop moving from a place of scarcity. You don't beg, chase, or convince. You attract. You align. You allow. Believing you're the prize doesn't mean you're arrogant or entitled. It means you've done the inner work to know your worth, and you refuse to settle for anything that threatens your peace, your dignity, or your value. It means that before anyone else validates you, you validate you. You set your own standards. You honor your boundaries. You choose yourself even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because acting like the prize is not about pretending you don't care. It's about caring for yourself so deeply that you're unwilling to let anyone play with your heart like it's cheap. When you embody that mindset, you don't flinch when someone pulls back. You don't spiral if a man doesn't call. You don't overextend, overexplain, or overgive in hopes of earning someone's attention. Why? Because you know attention is not the same as affection. Because you've learned that love offered conditionally or inconsistently is not real love, it's a game. You're here to be met, matched, and respected. That's what acting like the prize is all about. Refusing to abandon yourself just to be accepted by someone else. Being the prize means you trust in your own timing. You stop rushing what's meant for you. You stop lowering your standards just to fill a temporary void. You become selective, not because you're hard to please, but because your energy is expensive and not everyone can afford the cost. You don't base your value on who stays or who leaves. You don't internalize rejection. You understand that anyone who walks away is simply making space for someone more aligned with your frequency. Someone who doesn't just want you, but values you. Someone who recognizes the prize the moment they see it. The truth is, the more you act like the prize, the more the world reflects that back to you. Opportunities shift. Your relationships elevate. People begin to treat you with more care, not because they've changed, but because your energy has. Because you no longer entertain the bare minimum. You no longer pour into situations that drain you. You no longer sit in confusion hoping someone will choose you. You've already chosen yourself. And when that energy leads the way, it doesn't just attract attention, it commands respect. Acting like the prize is not a performance. It's not something you fake until you make. It's a decision, a daily choice to stop seeking love through self-abandonment and start finding power through self-honoring. It's in the way you speak to yourself, the way you protect your peace, the way you enforce your boundaries without guilt, the way you walk away when something no longer serves you. You don't need to be loud or aggressive to act like the prize. You just need to know your worth and live like it's not negotiable. So remember this, you are not here to beg, prove, or persuade anyone to see your worth. You are not here to shrink yourself into spaces that don't know how to hold you. You are here to be loved freely and without conditions. The right person will never make you question your place in their life. They'll call, they'll text, they'll show up, not because you demanded it, but because your energy calls for nothing less. The moment you stop chasing and start choosing yourself, you shift everything. You begin to attract not just attention, but devotion. Not just words, but action. Not just presence, but consistency. You become magnetic, not because you tried to be, but because you remembered who you are. And when you truly believe that you are the prize, the world and the people in it rise to meet you. Now walk like you're the one to be chosen, because you are. Talk like you're already loved, because you are worthy of it. Live like you're whole, because you already are. And never forget, the man who truly sees you won't hesitate, He'll call, he'll text, he'll show up, not because you asked, but because you didn't need to.